The Walt Disney Company. They pretty much own the movie industry right now. Between their self-named studio, Pixar, Marvel, LucasArts, 20th Century Fox, and everything else I didn't mention, it's almost surprising to hear about a movie that wasn't made by them. Not only are they known the world over for telling stories that have become cornerstones of childhoods, but they've also inspired countless others to reach for the stars and dream big. And for the last few years, their stories have dominated the box office. You know, back when we actually had a box office. Remember that? Good times. In the last decade, The House of Mouse has had the highest grossing movie of that year, with the exceptions being, what were they? Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, alright. And Transformers Age of Extinction? Are you kidding me? So you're telling me that Captain America, the Guardians of the Galaxy, The Hobbit, and The Hunger Games all lost to Michael Bay? Really? What was wrong with us in 2014? But aberrations aside, one cog in the Magic Kingdom's movie money machine is the live-action remake, where they take vintage Disney flicks and make some kind of change to it. With some, they flesh out characters or the lore of the story, and in others, they don't change anything at all except throw a big old bucket of realism on it. You know the one. Now, what are my thoughts on the Disney remakes? They're aight. I like the idea of introducing younger audiences to the classics, but on the other hand, it's not like the originals are that hard to find. It's not like, say, video games where it's almost impossible to get a legal copy of the Simpsons arcade game or the Scott Pilgrim game from a few years back. They're not going anywhere. If you want to see them, there's multiple ways to do that. I mean, originally I thought that the Mouse House would benefit from giving their more obscure movies the live-action treatment in order to make them a little more mainstream. But then they did that, and Pete's Dragon didn't quite pull in Jungle Book numbers, and Lady and the Tramp went from being a theatrical release to Disney Plus content padding. Dang it, now we're never gonna get an Oliver and Company remake. Thanks a lot, people. I was really hoping that would happen with all these coming down. And now we're gonna get a second live-action remake treatment of 101 Dalmatians. We don't really need that. How are you gonna top Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil? You can't do it. But hey, maybe there's still time since they're gonna give Bambi the live-action treatment. Eventually. Hey, but seriously though, why am I gonna watch, say, the new Lion King when I can watch the OG one on Disney Plus? The D-Squad barely changed anything in the movie because they knew they did it perfectly the first time. It was like Mickey himself came to us and was like, hey everybody, did you like the Lion King? Well, guess what? Now you can watch it again, except this time with real looking animals. Nah, Mick. Nah. I don't care if you put Beyonce in it. I don't care how perfectly John Oliver was cast to play the role he was born to play. And if you couldn't do this film without getting James Earl Jones to play Mufasa again, then you're just proving my point for me. Now here comes Mulan, the highly anticipated and much delayed entry into the Disney subgenre. But hey, we don't blame you, Mulan. If we knew what waited for us in 2020, we would have tried to postpone ourselves too. Mulan retells the story of the 1998 feature about the folktale of Hua Mulan, the woman who joined the Chinese army in the place of her father. And though at the time we fully embraced not just the characters of Mulan, Mushu, and the others, but as we watched the movie unfold, we thought to ourselves, so this is what China is like. But is that true? With our increased globalization in the last 20 years, we know a lot more about other cultures than we did in the past, almost through osmosis. And with the internet being as powerful as it is, we can easily dunk on culturally inaccurate flicks as soon as the trailers come out. Like, remember how Gods of Egypt thought they could get away with having a cast full of white people in a movie about, you know, Egypt? Yeah, that didn't turn out well for old Ridley now, did it? So how well has Mulan aged? Were the customs, images, and ideals portrayed in Disney's first Mulan story authentically Chinese? I'm the guidance guy, and we're gonna find out together. And though I don't think I really need to say this, watch out for them spoilers in Mulan. Cause really, who hasn't seen Mulan by this point? In fact, if you haven't seen it, go, take a break, go on Disney Plus, and then come on back. I'll still be here. It's truly ironic that the popularity of Mulan's story has almost made us numb to just how gripping it is. Think about it, a woman in a deeply patriarchal society goes into battle posing as the man and becomes a war hero? There's a reason why Mulan made the Disney princess roster despite not being royalty. You don't ignore greatness like that. Her backstory already makes her better than half the real princesses on the crew. And in her native China, Mulan is a favorite as well, with memorials to her that can be found all over the country. And remember, while Mulan isn't real, she's a folk hero. This would be like if we had statues to John Henry all over the place. And what's more, the story of Mulan even has multiple iterations by many authors. Sometimes it's a poem, sometimes it's a play. It's like she was the superhero of her day. You can learn about her through anything. Books, plays, shoot, they may even had 8 tracks about her. But of course, there's gonna be some differences. Because with any adaptation, you're gonna find some changes between said adaptation and the source material. So let's take a moment to look over the differences between Disney's Mulan and the original Mulan story as it's told in its many mediums. First off, in the original Tales of Mulan, the story had no supernatural elements. There were no ancestral spirits, no Mushu. Perhaps that's why the new Mulan doesn't have them. They're trying to go for a more authentic version of the folk story. Either that or Chinese audiences hated Mushu back in the day and making friends want to make this version of Mulan the Chinese version of Coco. But, you know. Though we all know the real reason. If they did have Mushu, there would be some complications. Cause if you're not gonna have Eddie Murphy reprise his role, then who else is gonna play Mushu? I mean, let's be real here, we're probably all thinking of the same person. So let's just say together, it'd be Kevin Hart. And you know what? He'd be great at it. He'd crush it. But then again, if you have Kevin Hart as Mushu, you gotta have his BFF The Rock in the movie too, cause for some reason these guys do like every movie together. And there's only one role The Rock is gonna play in this movie.
The little girl will be missing her doll. We should return it to her.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Unless you want to destroy people's expectations and have him play Chien Po or something. And see, you've already changed the cast of a movie that has every main character played by a Chinese person. You can't have that. But tangent aside, yes, the original Mulan tale was intended to be grounded in realism, so that's one thing. Next, the real Mulan could fight. In Disney's Mulan, we see her join the army as a well-meaning but very inept soldier who's incapable of pulling off basic maneuvers of combat. But in the original story, she was straight up Katniss Everdeen's son. She knew swordplay, understood archery. Mulan was ready for her moment. She showed up and did work, which was way cooler than what we got in the Disney version. But that creative decision did give us one of the greatest Disney songs of all time. Another big difference between the Disney film and the original story is the amount of time that Mulan spent in the Chinese army. You want to know how long Mulan was in the Chinese army in the poems of old? 12 years. Mulan did do some quick tour duty just long enough to save China and collect her medals. She played the long game, doing her thing for 12 years. But it does force me to ask, how was it that she was able to hide the fact that she was a woman for 12 years? In the animated film, she barely makes it halfway through the movie before getting called out. But that just makes her even more boss. Mulan was deep undercover for years, helping to save China under the guise of a man. You see Snow White or Aurora pulling that kind of awesomeness? Nuh-uh. But this next difference may be the biggest one of them all. The original story of Hua Mulan is not just that of a national hero, but a hero of Confucianism. In Confucianism, there are 6 main beliefs that focuses on different traits. Yi for righteousness, Xin for honesty, Chung for loyalty to the state, Li ritual and etiquette, Xiao family loyalty, and Zhen humanist towards one another. And the first tellings of Mulan are major examples of Chung and Xiao. Mulan is not about a woman who fights back against the man, who pushes back towards the government that's forcing her father to fight. No, she fulfills the wishes of her country the only way she can. She doesn't allow her family to become draft dodgers. She doesn't leave the country all Sound of Music like. Her family stays, and she takes on the risky and dangerous task of joining the army as a man. That is the type of selflessness and dedication to country that Chung is all about. But also we have Xiao, dedication to family. Not only does Mulan display her loyalty to China, she also shows loyalty to her father and her family by her actions. According to the aspect of Chung, her family must comply with the law that every family be represented in the war. Then Xiao comes into play to ensure that her father's honor is protected by making sure he doesn't have to put himself in danger by joining battle for him. And that displays another important part of Confucianism, the importance of relationships. Part of what makes Confucianism differ from other religions is how much it's based in philosophy and portrays itself more as a code of ethics instead of edicts from on high. And Li focuses specifically on different relationships between people and how those relationships should ideally work. This is the relationship hierarchy according to Confucianism: father over son, older brother over younger brother, husband and wife, ruler over subject, and friend being equal to friend. What you'll notice is that 3 out of the 5 important relationships in Confucianism come from the family. In Eastern thought, this is called filial piety, or respectfulness to one's family. The idea is that if you treat your family right, you're gonna treat other people right too. And considering that China is a collectivistic country that thrives on group excellence and individual sacrifice for the good of the many, filial piety fits into this perfectly. And Mulan doesn't just show up by taking her dad's place. In the original Mulan story, once she's done her part protecting her country and everyone's found out she was a woman the whole time, she doesn't accept any awards. After spending a dozen years fighting in the Chinese army, she doesn't even collect on the personal spoils that she's earned for her time. Instead, she simply states that she wants to go back home to her family now that her mission is complete. She's fulfilled her duty to family and country, and now she's ready to continue where she left off. She's not flaunting her battle success or writing books about her time as a man. She goes back to the life that she had before like nothing ever happened. And in some stories, she even gets married as soon as she gets home. And no, it's not to Shang, who's not even in the source material. There's no love interest in the original story of Mulan. And like I said, there are other adaptations to the story of Hua Mulan, and some of them get dark. Like in one where she comes back from the war, she discovers that her dad died long ago, her mom remarried, and that now she's being summoned to become a concubine. In response, she goes, "Bump that noise," and offs herself in defiance. Yeah, I doubt we're gonna get that version in the remake. But we've seen now that Mulan is definitely on the list of greatest females in fiction, and that there's more than good reason as to why her story has been told so many times over the years. So now we've come to the main event. How well did Disney translate the story of family pride, patriotism, and self-sacrifice in 1998? Well, let me explain. Okay, show of hands. How many of you have watched Mulan in the last year or so? Okay, alright.
Got him! Got him!
You know I can't see you, right? But anyway, if you've seen Mulan recently, you're quickly taken in by the Disney magic formula of storytelling. A kind-hearted, if not somewhat awkward protagonist with a dream that defines their life's purpose. A dream that they often sing to us to drive the point home. Because musical exposition is the best exposition. Then, with the help of some wacky sidekicks, the hero goes through some trials and overcomes their own fears, as well as a villain that seeks their destruction to reach their goal and perhaps even find love along the way, with several songs in their hearts to keep for all time. The end. It's simple, effective, and it's why the company that owns everything has used this strategy for decades now. But the only real change that now we have to play a guessing game to find out who the villain is, because we can't just have our villain be obvious anymore. They need to come out of nowhere and surprise us with their fake good guy act for most of the movie. And honestly, I'm ready for some out and proud villains again. We need our next generation versions of Scar, Ursula, and Jafar, man. Stop trying to pull the bait and switch, Disney. We're in on it now. And that goes the same thing for you, Pixar. There's a reason why Killmonger is much more memorable than the bad guy from Big Hero 6. See, I don't even remember his name. But yes, the mouse movie recipe has been massively successful in creating films that have made a firm place in our lives. And Mulan is no different. But in recent years, Mulan has been getting some pushback in its portrayal of Chinese culture. And that pushback has come from one single word: Orientalism. Orientalism, which frankly sounds like a word I need to apologize for saying because, you know, we just don't use that word anymore. but what it describes is a representation of Asia or the Middle East in a stereotyped way that is regarded as embodying a colonialistic or Western attitude. And this wasn't even the first time that the Magic Kingdom has been called out on that. This was the same accusation that was thrown at Aladdin at the first time it was released. So this is already a pretty troubling start. But is that the same thing as saying that Mulan is racist? Was it just a bunch of cliches about Asia thrown into a feature film for an hour and a half? Well, this is what you came here for, so let's get into this. Let's start with the first song in the movie, Honor to Us All. Mulan gets ready to meet the matchmaker in order to find a husband, but has to pass a test of wifey preparedness like it's the SATs of marriage or something. Now when we see Mulan come out of her beauty treatment, we see our first sign of trouble. Now whoa, hold up. Why does she have this makeup? And what's with the kimono? Because as any good weeaboo will tell you, Mulan's getup has nothing to do with China and has everything to do with Japan, with the kimono being the national dress of the country. And what you don't want to do is mix up Japan and China, because they're historic rivals. This would be like getting the Lakers confused with the Celtics. You just don't do that. And also, that's just racist to do. So that's not great. We're not 10 minutes in, and we already have an example of the mouse looking at customs from two different countries and going, it's Asia. They're pretty much the same thing, right? Granted, that's not the worst thing you could do, but a little research could have prevented that faux pas. But then it happens again! After Mulan epically fails the waifu test, in which the matchmaker shames her for being clumsy? Which I guess means that no man would ever want her. Clearly the matchmaker doesn't get points for adorkability, because in that regard, Mulan's in great company. After this, Mulan sings her pain away and then talks to her father about the predicament and... Hold up. Alright, we're all seeing this, right? What's going on here? This, my friends, is a cherry blossom tree. It's a beautiful tree, isn't it? It's very atmospheric, it helps to spice up the color palette in the scene, and it doesn't belong in this movie at all. Why? Because just like the kimono and the makeup, the cherry blossom tree originates in Japan. Seriously, Disney? Again? Come on, man. This might be excusable if this happened just once, but you went and did this 3 times in 15 minutes in a 90-minute movie. I know the internet wasn't the same beast back in 1998 that it is now, but you're telling me that no one thought that maybe you should double check your elements of Asian culture to make sure that it actually reflects the country that you're portraying for a movie set for international release? Now, the concerns of Orientalism in Mulan come from more than just nitpicks. Though these gaffes are problematic, that's not the biggest change made to the Chinese folk hero. Because if we go back to the definition of Orientalism, a major part of it is a piece of work that portrays an Eastern culture through a Western perspective. And in Mulan, it goes beyond just getting Japanese attire and botany confused. This goes right to the core of what the story of Mulan is supposed to be about. Because remember, in her native country, Mulan is a story of the ideal Chinese woman, a lady who's willing to do whatever it took to uphold her family's honor and to show respect for her country. Her tale was supposed to be an example of how Confucianism transformed someone from being a daughter of a warrior to becoming a warrior herself. And if you put that story in American hands, well, things kind of get lost in translation. Though we see Mulan's pride in her family and her desire to not let them down with her mishaps, we get a very different feel about Disney Mulan's framing in regards to her character. Everything we see from Bring Us Honor to Reflection shows us that Mulan wants to contribute to her family, she wants to be a bright spot on the Fa name, but she just can't do it in the conventional way. Wearing makeup, being docile, subservient, and quiet, that's just not who she is. She's spunky, creative, a go-getter. She displays traits that don't fit the traditional definition of a proper Chinese woman. But you know what those qualities are descriptive of? These are some of the characteristics that Western cultures love in their people. Over here in the West, we love people who ask for forgiveness instead of permission, who buck tradition, and who innovate. Mulan is seen as different, as someone who stands out amongst her peers. This difference brings her nothing but trouble at the beginning of the film, but by the end, it's that difference that helps her save China. Mulan's individuality is what makes her special in Disney's version, whereas in the original story of Mulan, it's her dedication to the collective that makes her exceptional. And in the culture of China, where giving your all for the group is prioritized over your individual needs, you begin to see a very un-Chinese influence making its way through this rendition of the Chinese war hero. The next change we see that reflects a Western-tinted way of seeing Mulan is her motivation. Now on the surface, there appears to be no difference. She still joins the army first and foremost to spare her father the burden of going to war in his already battle-worn condition. This is true, but still, the framing of the movie gives us another side of these events. Because after she gets shut down by the matchmaker, just what does she sing about in reflection? She laments that she'll never meet the expectations of her family or her culture to be who they want her to be, and she's yearning to discover who she wants to be, even if it's not what's being prescribed to her. Let's look at the lyrics of Reflection. It's a short song with only 89 words, yet the words I, me, or myself appear 15 times. Or put another way, of the 16 lines that make up Reflection, 13 of them have the words that describe the self. That's 86% of the lines of the song where Mulan is referring to herself. Now, this is not a condemnation of the song, this is just another example of how the viewpoint of an individualistic country is influencing a story from the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, with this setup of Mulan being different from the girls around her and knowing that she's different but not having a clue what to do about it, she's determined to make her own way, to make herself happy first and foremost, which are values that are highly treasured in Western cultures like the country the film was made in. Now let's go through the rest of the film. Her father is drafted into the army, and though her father is willing to go, he's physically unable. Mulan sees this and knows she has to do something about it, and takes her father's place despite not having any combat skills, but just the desire to do something. Her determination and ability to get back up over and over again propels her to become battle ready, and her unique thinking is what's able to outwit the Huns in the mountains. And even when she's outed as a woman, disgraced and left behind, she still doesn't stop, making her way to the capital to take on Shan Yu and save the Emperor. And yes, she does return home like she did in the original, but this time, she's taking home some hardware. She has Shan Yu's sword and has a medal declaring her exceptional in battle. This time, she accepts awards for her exploits and the trophies that show that she's responsible for the Chinese victory over the Huns. And when she comes home to present these spoils to her father, she has a very different affect than she did at the beginning of the movie. She's not crying, she's not distraught or confused, she has a clear vision of who she is and what she's accomplished because of who she is. Disney's Mulan did go to war for the sake of her family, but she also did it for herself. She did it to test herself, to see what she was capable of, to find herself. By going to war, she discovers that her quirky self may not make her best girl by her culture's definition, but it was exactly what was needed to take down the Huns and bring peace to China. Her journey validated her as a person, and now she's ready to continue her life with the knowledge that she brought honor not just to her family and her country, but to herself. What I just described was an example of a coming-of-age story, a tale in which the main character grows as a person. It can be either their literal growth from childhood to adulthood, or a growth of maturity in how the protagonist views themselves or the world around them. The coming-of-age tale is a tried and true method of storytelling. In fact, is a major ingredient in the mouse movie recipe of stories, with examples going as far back as Bambi. But it's also a very Western method of storytelling. Going back to the original Mulan story, though Hua Mulan was the main character of the story, the focus was not so much on her feelings or her place in the world, it was about her answering the call to something greater than herself. And you can make the case that going to war for your country is a cause greater than yourself, which it is. Though through the framing of the 1998 movie, Mulan focuses not on the patriotism of serving your country, but on the growth that Mulan goes through as she's serving her country. This doesn't make Mulan bad, it simply makes it a very Western interpretation of an Eastern story. The Walt Disney Company took the story of Mulan, with its ties to Chinese religion and connection to collectivistic values, and transformed it into a movie of how individualistic excellence can bring enlightenment. And for the record, Mulan is never credited for saving all of China in her source material like she is in the Disney film. She's not Wonder Woman coming down on the battlefield and single-handedly turning the tides of war. She's simply a member of a larger group whom together protected their country. It's her selfless dedication to family and country that make Mulan great in China. And here in the US of A, she's a feminist icon who fought against the sexism of her day to show that girls can fight too, as well as being another instance in the Disney menagerie that your differences can be your greatest strength. So what's the verdict here? Is Disney's Mulan nothing more than racist, westernized trash that disgraces the good name of the original? In my mind, no. It didn't go out of its way to make the Chinese look bad, it doesn't make insulting generalizations, and they did try to make efforts to make the cast reflect the culture being portrayed, kind of. I mean, not even counting Eddie Murphy, there's quite a few English-sounding names in here, and even the ones that you think might be Chinese, they're not. Now, is Mulan Orientalist? Oh yeah, there's no denying that, but that doesn't make it racist. Just trust, if you want to see an example of Disney being racist and reveling in insulting stereotypes, go see Song of the South. Oh wait, you can't, cause Disney's so ashamed of that movie's existence that they haven't released it to the public in any way. That's how you know Disney's messed up, they want you to forget that it even happened. Not to mention, when a movie or other piece of media wants to be racist, you never have to wonder if they're trying to be bigoted. They'll let you know. No, Disney's Mulan was not an intentional attack on the Chinese or a vehicle to embarrass them. I would attribute their cultural slip-ups more to intellectual laziness more than malicious intent. And the shift in themes perhaps was done on a subconscious level. Since most of the makers of the movie were white guys with a Western perspective, it was probably inevitable that Mulan would have some added ideas that weren't originally found in the source material. But personally, I believe that's what's made Mulan's character so endearing throughout the years. Mulan translates and transcends through cultures with her story of how bravery knows no gender. And so what can we expect from the new remake? It does appear as though Disney has learned from their mistakes in the past, such as giving the roles to people of actual Chinese descent, so that's a good start. Will new Mulan focus more on the Confucianistic morals that the first poems and plays depicted? It'd be really something if Disney's second try at Mulan not only fixes the issues of the first, but breathes a life into it that wasn't completely there back in '98. How will it all work out? I don't know, but I'm pretty optimistic about Mulan 2020. I can't wait to see if this film will be true to the heart of the story told hundreds of years ago. Another week, another Disney movie comes out. It really is starting to feel like it's getting back to normal, isn't it? This time it's Pixar bringing the goods with Luca, the story of a sea creature that's curious about the world of the surface, who's entranced by objects used by humans, and who eventually joins the land dwellers against the wishes of their parents. Well, wait, what? Yeah, so Luca was a disappointment for me. As I watched this thing, I kept wondering what was going on. Was Pixar making this film in an alternate universe where the Little Mermaid didn't exist? I mean, if you watch the movie, you see the same story beats. It felt like I was watching The Little Mermaid, but just with a boy this time. I was just waiting for Ursula to show up, man. But as I say this movie does throw in a wrench into the story about 75% of the way in, and if you saw it, you know what I'm talking about. It was at that point that Luca started to come into its own, and trust, we're gonna get to that. I wish I'd taken that direction much sooner, but whatever. And we're actually gonna discuss not the main character Luca, but his friend Alberto. What is it about Luca's BFF that we need to pay attention to? I'm the guidance guy, and your internet school counselor is gonna take the dive into this young man's psyche. And naturally, watch out for them spoilers for Luca. We're going all in, so if you haven't seen it, this is your last chance. Now, our boy Alberto comes onto the scene as Luca feeds his curiosity for the human world. He teaches Luca how to walk, how to move around on the surface, about gravity. He literally teaches him how the world works. And the main quest of these two is to get themselves a Vespa. To anyone else, it's just a basic scooter, but to them, it's the symbol of being on the surface. It's the feeling of being unhinged, unattached, and as the poster says, it's freedom. And as these two go about their days on the surface, Alberto imparts a very important concept to our young sea monster, the idea of silencing your Bruno. For Luca, having grown up with all the horrors of the surface dwellers and what they do to fish and other sea creatures, he's a pretty nervous guy. He plays it safe and he's not the type to be taking big risks. As a result of his upbringing, he constantly second-guesses himself, which makes his overall confidence not at optimal levels. But then Alberto, the quick-thinking, smooth-talking young man of swag, tells Luca the secret of his confidence. by shutting up the voice in his head telling him to doubt himself and to bravely jump into whatever challenge is in front of him. And the thing is that Alberto is 100% on point with this. The idea of shutting down your Bruno is right in line with a concept called self-talk. Look, we all talk to ourselves. We all have an internal monologue that goes on in our minds as we go about our day. We hear it when we reach our goals, or trip and fall on our faces in public, when we go on a date, or when we get friend-zoned. There's an ongoing conversation that we have of ourselves as we go through life, and we do need to be careful about what we say to ourselves, because it does reflect in how we act. Because Luca's self-talk has been dominated by fear and anxiety of being captured/killed/eaten, that anxiety dominates how he acts. He wants to branch out and live a life of adventure, but has trouble making that jump for himself. But bring in an Alberto or a Julia whose self-talk is driven by a can-do, will-do mentality as we see in the movie, they drive him to bravery and inspire him to become more. And that can work for us as well. What we believe about ourselves impacts what we do, how we carry ourselves, and how we talk about ourselves. And if your self-talk is controlled by negative thoughts, it's only going to bring forth anxiety, doubt, uncertainty, and ultimately it will have you living beneath your ability. But on the other hand, with a self-taught script that's ingrained with the good that you can do, what you can bring to the table, and the belief that you will succeed even when you fail, that will inspire confidence, perseverance, and a positive outlook. And there are many ways to change that inner self-talk. You can just forcibly shut down your inner critic and push through your limits like Alberto says, or you can try to replace those lines that you say to yourself with the exact opposite. And if you want to reach out to others for help on how to do that, don't be afraid to do so. It worked out for Luca after all. But here's the thing about Alberto and self-talk that we need to be careful about. What do you do when your self-talk is lying to you? Throughout Luca, Alberto is framed as this brimming, invincible, quick-witted kid who can do anything and isn't afraid of anybody. If we compared him to another Disney character, I'd say he's pretty close to Aladdin in terms of personality. He lives alone, knows how to survive on his own, and except with a couple of exceptions, he's perfectly fine keeping it that way. And this is because his inner voice has been feeding him that he can make it on his own, and as a result, he's created a self-fulfilling prophecy. A perfect example of how positive self-talk can lead to success. But his self-talk wasn't all, "You got this, bro, you're the best." One part of Alberto's inner talk was the idea of, "Don't trust the humans, they won't accept you." And this is brought up in the scene I talked about earlier. At this point, Luca and Alberto are at odds in regards to their goals. Luca actually wants to stay on the surface and go to school with Julia, but Alberto wants to stick to the plan, win the race, get the Vespa, and get out of town. This leads to Julia finding out the truth about them, but not in the way that you think. I personally expected Alberto to out Luca as a sea monster to prove his point, but no, he actually outs himself. He dips himself into the ocean and emerges as his true form to show Luca that no human would want to coexist with them if they knew the truth. He believed this line of thinking so much that he was willing to throw off his own mission. This leads to Alberto diving away to avoid Ercole and his crew, but Luca later finds Alberto at their old hideout, and it's here that we find Alberto's other two self-talk truths. You don't need anybody because you only mess things up. Sadly, we don't get much insight into what led Alberto to believe the latter, but we do discover the story behind the former. Alberto was abandoned by his father, so though he believes that he can make it by himself, he does so because he believes that he doesn't need anyone as a direct result of being left to fend for himself. And this is another area where we need to be careful with our self-talk. Our self-talk is born from our experiences, and if we don't see our experiences properly, it can lead to dangerous inner dialogue. Even though he was making it big on the outside, Alberto's mindscape was stained by lies and hyper-independence. So how do you undo all that? When it comes to reframing your self-talk, it's very difficult to do alone. You'll notice that with both Luca and Alberto, neither of them were able to do it by themselves. They needed each other to show each other the flaws in their own inner voices. And it's the same way with us. We see life through our own perspective. And if we try to fix ourselves through our own perspective, it won't be long before you start justifying to yourself the reasons why you don't need to change and that you were right all along. I encourage you to reach out to someone you trust and who will be honest and objective with you. It could be a close friend, mentor, anyone who wants to see you be better. And once you find that person, spend the time and do the work to undo that damage. It won't be easy and it will take time, but you can't deny the results when you see them. Luca shows us that we can find acceptance no matter who we are. And the most important kind of acceptance that we need doesn't come from others, but it starts from within. So after delays and a lot of uncertainty about what this movie was going to be about, Soul has finally come out on Disney+. And after seeing it, I gotta say, there's a lot to unpack here, including the truth behind the journey of a certain middle school band teacher. I'm not kidding, people. Soul has so much to look into. I really wasn't expecting a Pixar movie to go all existential with its exploration of what is our purpose in life and what gives life meaning. But I could discuss this movie more in future minis and even full guidance guys. Just let me know in the comments what you think. And be sure to do the YouTube thing while you're there. Like, subscribe if you're new here, and be sure to ring that bell so you know when a new video comes out. But this is not a review, that's not my thing. What I want to do is take a closer look at Joe Gardner's arc as he went through the movie. And obviously, don't be watching this if you haven't seen Soul, then get all butthurt when spoilers come up. I'm gonna give you some time to walk away. Perhaps check out my Wonder Woman video, or my Pixar Top 10. You got options. I'll give you a sec. Alright, time's up. Now, for the rest of you, how could it be that Joe was a lost soul? I'm the guidance guy, and I'll explain. In Soul, we see our man, Mr. G, going about his life as a middle school band teacher. And based on the students he has in class, it's pretty rough. He loves music, but not what he's doing right at the moment. But he gets a shot at his dream of being a pro musician when he's tapped to join Dorothea Williams' band for a gig. And then he dies. Yup, homeboy gets his chance to do the thing he's always wanted to do, only to immediately kick the bucket. Dang, that's some Hannah Baker kind of luck, am I right? Then he ends up in the great beyond, but determined not to be dead, he actually ends up going the other way, to the great before, and it's there that he's paired with 22, a soul that is so close to becoming human and going to Earth, except for the fact that she doesn't want to be human in the first place. Cue the spiritual hijinks! But where I want to spend our time with this movie is the place where I honestly wish Soul spent more time in. The Zone. Have you ever been so into something that you felt like you were in another place? Whether you were engrossed in taking apart or fixing a piece of machinery, reading a really good book, or as in Mr. G's case, raptured by the power of music? If you've experienced that, you, my friend, have been in the zone. You are no longer taking in the sights and sounds of your surroundings. It's an out-of-body experience in which it's just you and your thing, whatever that happens to be. But as Joe and 22 explore this landscape, they realize that the zone is not completely a land of ecstasy and joy. They also encounter these wandering monsters across the land. They are the lost souls, people who, as Moonwind describes, are obsessed by something that disconnects them from life. And the film shows us in real time someone who is in the midst of the zone, gets ensnared by it, and then transforms into that lost soul. A lost soul is what happens when someone becomes addicted to the zone. The euphoria, the joy, the sense of connectedness between yourself and something greater. They become dependent on it, and it causes them to lose perspective on their own existence. And I'm sorry, but how does that not describe Joe Gardner at the beginning of this movie? Think about it. He's a middle-aged man still chasing that dream of becoming a star pianist, but is simply going through the motions of life. Here he has the opportunity to share his love of music with others, to give other people that inspiration that his father gave him when he was young, and he's wasting it. And I'm certain that if we were able to see Joe's life before the movie started in the zone, he would have been a lost soul, shuffling through life looking for that gig that will jumpstart his life. His only objective is being up on that stage, basking in the glow of the zone. And remember what happens when, after all the nonsense that happened to him in between, when he finally gets to live out that dream? He enjoyed it, but found it unfulfilling, as if his soul was asking, hold up, that's it? And that's the limitation of the zone. It's a great place to visit, we just can't live there. Remember that scene in The Incredibles where Dash and Helen are talking in the car about why Dash can't do track, and then she goes,
everyone's special, Dash, which is another way of saying no one is.
Believe it or not, that exchange also applies to our music man. Mr. G has fooled himself into thinking that you can live out your life in the zone, in this zenith of human pleasure, but you just can't. Life has ups and downs. Sure, we'd all love to be on the mountaintop all the time, but you never truly appreciate the high moments until you've experienced the lowest ones. If your life was nothing but an endless stream of good things and good feels, you'd actually get bored with it. Why? Because if every moment of your life was great, can you really call your life great? Greatness demands a comparison. For there to be a moment of greatness, there needs to be a moment of not greatness to compare it with. As much as we don't want to admit it, we need our low moments, the times where life is just pure trash, so that when we enter the zone, we can appreciate it much more. And it helps us to enjoy the smaller moments as well, like taking a walk on a cool afternoon, catching up with an old friend, or simply enjoying some good music. And that's how our lost soul found his way in the end. Life doesn't have purpose based on how long one has been in the zone. Its purpose is given on how much you enjoy every moment, by how much you influence the lives of those around you. And as we head into this new year, let's do the same thing. Let's strive to visit the zone every once in a while, but also see how many others we can take there with us as well. When you hear the word Pixar, what usually comes to mind? You're probably thinking about your Toy Stories, your Incredibles, your Cars. No, I'm just kidding. We're talking about the good Pixar movies here, people. But for me, there needs to be space in the dialogue for greatest Pixar flicks for Inside Out. No, it doesn't have a prequel or a sequel, but its premise and world was the stuff of genius. Transforming complex concepts about how the brain works and how it influences us as people into simple and compelling aspects of a story was just vintage Pixar. No one else could have done it better. Yeah. I know that movie was a thing. But what makes Inside Out special is the fact that the body is not just the setting for the movie, it becomes alive in such a way that it feels like its own character. And as a school counselor, Inside Out gives perhaps the best example of the importance of mental health in all of cinema. That's a pretty big hot take, I can hear some of you saying. How are you gonna back that up? I'm the guidance guy, and watch me back my claims. We've all seen the memes that poke fun at how the premise for most Pixar movies is essentially, what if X had feelings? And with Inside Out, it's almost as if they saw those memes and went, oh yeah? Now we're gonna make feelings have feelings. Now again, there are other films and shows about the goings-on of the human body. Osmosis Jones, that episode of Rick and Morty, that one episode of The Magic School Bus, and the list goes on. But Inside Out does more than simply give a tour of the human anatomy, but shows us the different functions of the brain, how our memories are created and stored, and how our emotions play a major role in how we act and even perceive the world. And that's a major aspect of this movie that Pixar brilliantly showed without bashing us over the head with it until we got a concussion. For example, when sadness turns Riley's happy memories of Minnesota into sad ones, that wasn't just the plot escalating. It was a manifestation of nostalgia. Now, it can be hard to see nostalgia as anything but a good feeling with our current media landscape reviving old stories and characters because of a set of people that remember them fondly, but the core of nostalgia is a certain level of sadness. Not for the subject of the nostalgia, but for what it represents, a happier time that you just can't go back to. Or how about the personality islands? They represent not just aspects of Riley's being, but also the core principle of just how powerful our memories can be in influencing the people we become. For example, think of your favorite hobby. Have you ever wondered why that was your favorite hobby? Chances are you could trace it back to a specific point in time. Perhaps a Christmas present you got, seeing a family member really enjoying it and wanting to join in the fun, or just it being your way of honoring the memory of someone else. Those memories influenced how you thought and felt about a particular event or activity, and all those parts of Inside Out tie together in its core message: the importance of all our emotions. Our emotions can be a funny thing sometimes. They can bring us to the highest of peaks and the lowest of lows. They can help us make the best decisions or lead us into utterly thoughtless mistakes. But as crazy, unpredictable, and even annoying as our feelings can be, Inside Out shows us the importance of all of them and their impact on our mental health. And this is done through the relationship between joy and sadness. Joy is not only Riley's primary emotion, she was Riley's first, being there from the beginning and thus an integral part of Riley's personality. Compare this to sadness, who was not only the polar opposite of joy, but also is an emotion that people generally don't like to feel. It doesn't feel good to be sad. So in the beginning, we see Joy constantly push sadness into her corner, which turns out to be Riley's attempts to repress the sadness that she feels towards moving away. Riley felt that she needed to be happy for the sake of her parents, who were clearly having a hard time adjusting to San Fran. She wanted to be happy. She wanted to enjoy this new experience, but it's hard to do that when you're eating broccoli on a pizza. But when we try to repress our emotions, they always find a way to come out. That's where sadness's ability to override memories came from. The need for a venue for Riley to vent her own disappointment towards the move. And when sadness and joy are taken out of the picture entirely, we see Riley enter a void of not just depression, but of a numb emptiness about everything going on around her. And it's not until sadness takes control and gives Riley that chance to display her true feelings that things finally start to turn around. But notice how her situation didn't change. She was still living in Cali and was still the new kid at school, but once she allowed herself to express her real feelings honestly, her perspective on her reality gave her the skills to cope and adapt. Fun fact, Inside Out came out not long before I got my first job as a guidance counselor. Ironically, I was actually working at Disney at the time. I had applied for dozens of jobs at schools, but ran into the age-old problem of no one wants to give you a job because you have no experience, and your only comeback is, well, how can I get experience unless I get a job? I was actually unsure if I was going to get a counselor job given I haven't worked in education beforehand. But Inside Out reminded me of why I wanted to be a school counselor in the first place. To assist students and guide them through these goofy, unpredictable, and sometimes unexplainable emotions. To remind them that all of our emotions exist for a reason, even the ones that don't make us feel good. Despite our society's message that joy and happiness are the only emotions that we should experience, we need the other emotions in order to fully experience life. By denying our emotions and suppressing them, we ultimately hurt ourselves and our ability to connect with others. Whatever you're going through right now, don't deny those feelings. Of course, don't do anything with those feelings that would either hurt yourself or others, but whether it's through music, writing, exercise, or talking, allow yourself to fully feel. Because as sadness showed Bing Bong, sometimes we need to go through a little discomfort to get where we really want to be. It took some time, but Raya and the Last Dragon is finally free on Disney+. And now that it's summer, your guidance guy finally has some free time to take a look at it. And even though I'm not a reviewer, I will say that Raya is a good movie to check out. The animation is perhaps the best I've seen from the Mouse House. The story is something that's truly meant for these times, and I must say that it's a solid addition to the Disney film collection. I see it as Baby's first apocalyptic / MacGuffin chaser movie. You know, assuming that Baby hasn't already seen Avengers Endgame. But there's something in this movie that isn't seen as the true danger that it is. It's not the Druin, it's not the selfishness of the people of Kumandra. It's something that Raya herself had to fight against in her own journey. Raya and the Last Dragon is one of those Disney movies that strays away from the classic formula that we're used to. It's not a musical, and even though one can make a case that Raya is a princess in the same way that Pocahontas is, she sure doesn't play the part of the princess role. She's taking a page from the Mad Max Fury Road book and making action herself. And we're also introduced to a dark world where crap has hit the fan, things have gone wrong, and Raya's the one who has to make things right. But in her journey, she has a lot of obstacles in her way. The Druun, the other tribes, and of course Namari. But Raya had another foe that she needed to take down in this story, and it's a foe that we need to be mindful of in our own lives. What is this hidden enemy that I'm talking about? I'm the guidance guy, and your internet school counselor is here to walk you through this. Let's start at the beginning. Kumandra was once a land of unity and harmony, where everyone was able to live peacefully, respecting each other's culture, and with the knowledge that the dragons were responsible for their current state.
Then, everything changed when the
Druun
attacked.
These creatures emerged from the deep, stealing the souls of not just the citizens of Kumandra, but also putting the dragons at risk as well. But thanks to Sisu and the Last Dragons, they were able to take out the Druun once and for all and revive the people of Kumandra. But all that was left of Sisu was an orb that was the embodiment of her magic that had been in possession of the Heart Tribe ever since. However, the existence of the orb became a source of contention for the other tribes who wanted it for themselves. Raya's father Benga, the chief of the Heart tribe, had a passion for uniting the people of Kumandra like in the good old days and invites all the tribes to break bread and hopefully find peace. But this opportunity is literally broken when Suzu's orb is shattered, which brings the return of the Droon, which separates the people even further. And from all that, we're hearing some familiar themes pop up, aren't we? The fighting over resources that tears people apart and throws them into unending war. Human conflict consuming people and threatening the collective soul of humanity. Despite all the fantasy elements, the story of Raya is way more realistic than we might think originally. All we have to do is turn on the news to see the kind of thing that we see in Disney's latest cinematic offering. And as we see Raya grow up and continue her mission to find Sisu and undo the work of the Droon, we see the world that she inhabits. A desolate world in which self-interest is the only interest and everything is done in the name of self-preservation. Again, we've seen glimpses of this in recent days. Although not as dire as we see in the movie, we've seen examples of people and organizations that are more than willing to ruin the lives of others as long as they aren't in the line of fire. And all of this sets up the stage to reveal the hidden enemy of this movie. I brought this up earlier, but it's worth repeating. Raya is not a typical Disney protagonist. She doesn't fit the traditional Disney princess build. She's continuing the Moana and Elsa trend of the strong female protagonist that don't need no man trope. And although she has a dream, bringing her father back from the grips of the Droon's stony grasp, she's lacking something that just about every other Disney main character has. That upbeat, happy-go-lucky, wide-eyed optimism that fuels their dream and keeps them going through every hardship and challenge. She ain't no Rapunzel singing the day away despite being under house arrest. She's taking her animal sidekick across the desert, brooding like a Batman character. But we know she wasn't always like this. At the beginning of the movie, we see Raya with that trademark indomitable spirit of confidence and hope that things will change. But what happened? Oh yeah, that's right, it was Namari's betrayal that ripped that spirit right out of her. And what was left was a hero that still wants to bring an end to the Droon, still wants to get her father back, but now we have a cynical protagonist that's lost all trusted people. And this is the hidden enemy of the film. Raya had to overcome her own distrust in order to become the hero that would be capable of bringing her land together. Now this is tough to hear because in our culture we tend to lionize the cynical, the character that scoffs at the naive and trusts only in their own instincts. And there's a charm in those kinds of characters. But there's a reason why these types tend to stay likable only in our screens instead of in real life. Because in real life, these people aren't cool, they aren't the type of people that others look up to, they're just miserable human beings. Because this is what happens to cynics. They become pessimists. They can't or don't want to see the positive in a situation. They use the possibility of the negative as a shield to protect themselves from disappointment. But even when they're right, they ain't happy, so what's the point? Also, they're selfish. With Raya, her cynicism got so bad that she didn't even care about saving the world, she just wanted her dad back. And it's that kind of selfishness that got Kumandra into that mess in the first place. We see that selfishness in so many characters in the movie, and yet no one is content. Everyone is either lacking, greedy, or paranoid of those who are looking for revenge. And lastly, and this is the big one, cynicism blocks people off. As Raya begins her journey to reunite the Orb of Sisu, she is essentially alone, and she was determined to keep it that way. But as time went on, she gathered more and more allies, and everyone who joined her played a pivotal part in restoring the orb and saving the world. She was not going to be able to do all that by herself, and that's the most dangerous part of cynicism. It isolates. Just like how Kumandra had isolated itself by region, Raya had blocked her heart off to connecting with people, to believing in people, and trusting in others, the very values that her father had preached when she was young. And it was only when she began to trust again that she was able to set the example for the rest of the world as to how to return everything to its former state. And it applies to us too. We need to be wary of cynicism closing us off as well. Cynicism is often the result of disappointment, like how Raya was disappointed by Namari's intentions. But look at Sisu. She was disappointed by the chief of the Talon tribe, but she still knew that this experience was not the sum total of all human experience. And that's the attitude that we need to adopt. It's not easy, and in some cases it will take time to heal, but we need to remember that you don't have to heal alone. Raya certainly needed help to heal, and don't be afraid to do the same. Because when we see cynicism, we see selfishness. And when we see selfishness, in time, we see nothing but ruin.
the king of beasts with quite so little hair.
Huh. You know, it's just occurred to me. If you take these songs and boil them down to their base elements, these songs are essentially the same. You see that too, right? One song is about how one character wants to be king, and the other is a song about how one character wants to be king. That's right, we have ourselves a Disney movie in which the protagonist and the antagonist both want the same thing. Huh. Yeah, we gotta talk about this. This is really interesting, because when looking at Disney's animated offerings, we don't often see a scenario in which the hero and the villain are both vying for the same thing. Sure, there's films like Beauty and the Beast where both the protag and the antag eventually have the same goal, but Lion King is one of the few Disney flicks that plays like a Pokemon game. Both characters want the same thing from the beginning, but there's only space for one of them to get it. But Lion King plays it more like the old school Pokemon games where the rival actually dislikes the MC as opposed to being their sycophantic best friend or well-meaning chump who just can't measure up. But going as far as murder? Pokemon didn't take it there, but Scar did. He didn't care that he would have to take out his big bro and his nephew to do it. He knew what he wanted and was willing to do anything to get it. And Simba? Before he went through his slacker phase, our cub prince was ready to take the throne and become the next ruler of the Pride Lands. Of course, he didn't realize that his pops would have to go down in order for that to happen, but he wasn't about to go all Game of Thrones in the savannah. Within all of this, we see a tale not just of a family descended to utter chaos, but a story of ambition. How it can be fostered, how it can be dangerous, and how it can guide us to where we need to be. How does Simba and Scar's ambition define them in their quest for the crown? I'm the guidance guy, and your internet school counselor is ready to enter the lion's den to get you answers. Beneath the upbeat songs and the energetic characters, The Lion King is a film about intrigue, betrayal, and overcoming your past to become the very best you can be. It's a surprisingly deep story for a kids movie, and part of that depth is the journey that Scar and Simba take in their lives and how oddly similar they are. Like I said, they both wanted the same thing, and the thing they wanted, to be King of Pride Rock, wasn't inherently bad. I mean, come on, they wanted to be king. They see Mufasa roaming around the Pride Lands, doing his thing, the respect he demands, the power that he holds. Yeah, it's understandable that they would want that too. And as far as both of them were concerned, the possibility to take the throne for themselves was there. All Simba had to do was wait for dear old dad to kick the bucket, and then boom, he's next man up. For Scar now, the path is a little more complicated. We see at the beginning of the movie that Scar is quite the salty uncle. Come on, Scar, don't be like that, man. Your bro just had his first kid, everyone's excited and came over to visit and celebrate. Why you gotta be Debbie Downer over here?
Life's not fair, is it? You see, I shall never be king.
Oh yeah. That's a little awkward for your life goals, isn't it? For old Scar, his path to power involves a few more steps, namely that his big brother and his nephew would both need to be taken out of the picture for him to take charge. And when Simba's born, he sees this as the death blow for any chance that he could make his ascension. But the film sets up Scar and Simba's paths pretty early, showing that Scar is in an almost desperate state to reach his goal, while Simba knows that his future is pretty much set, and all he has to do is run out the clock until he's free to roam around all day and do it all his way. So now that we've summarized their situation, we get to take a look at how their strongest trait guided them through their stories. Let's see how their drive moved them, guided their actions, and impacted them when they ran into difficulties. Because how they handled their ambition tells us a lot about how we can handle ours. Alright, dictionary time. What even is ambition anyway? You know what it is when you see it, but defining it can be tricky. The generic definition is a strong desire to achieve something. When you want to make a change to yourself, get something you don't already have, you're showing ambition. And in the case of our animated felines, their ambition is plain as day. How? Obviously, this is a Disney movie. They sang about it. We hear Simba's joy about the opportunity to be top cat one day and being able to run the savannah. And on the other side, we also hear that in Scar's signature tune. He has not just the desire, but he's got a plan. Granted, it's a very murdery plan, but it still counts as a plan. But that leads us to the next question. Is ambition good or bad? And that's the first thing we need to know about ambition. It's neither good or bad, it's completely neutral. Just like with our emotions, it's not whether or not you have ambition that has moral value attached to it, it's what you do with it. And for the bright side of drive, let's take a look at little Sim Sim here. With him, we see that ambition inspires you to action. Why did Simba go to the elephant graveyard? Sure, we can dunk on him for doing it to show off and for almost falling into his uncle's trap to get himself turned into hyena chow, but he tells his father the deeper reason why he pulled this crazy stunt.
I was just trying to be brave like you.
I don't think he came up with that just as an excuse to get off the hook. I truly believe that Simba wanted to show himself that he could stand up to danger and the unknown like Disney's best dad over here. He knew that in order to become a great king, he needed to be able to have the courage to face danger. His problem was that he didn't have the maturity to know that you don't go searching for bravery challenges because life will bring them to you in time. If you want something for yourself, you have to take action at some point. Wanting it alone isn't enough. You gotta go out and do something to build that future you see for yourself. Now, how you go about it is important too, but if you have a desire but you have no plan to take action, what you have is just a dream, which is often all you need in Disney movies. But dreams alone just don't cut it in the real world. The second aspect of Simba's ambition for the crown that we need to take note of is that ambition doesn't quit. Now, at first it may sound like our golden cat is a terrible example of this. I mean, the whole middle of the movie is dedicated to showing how Simba gave up on his goal and fully embraced the slacker life until Nala made him feel the love tonight. But here's the thing though. What happened with Simba is actually a pretty realistic portrayal of how we sometimes struggle with the follow-through required to reach our lofty goals. Yeah, it's not as dramatic as your shady uncle tricking you into thinking that you just killed your dad, but when we strive to do something greater than ourselves, we all face times of doubt and the temptation to just stop and go full Hakuna Matata. We ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Is it really worth all this trouble? Am I even getting anywhere? And there are times when we fall to those temptations and just stop. But you'll notice what happened to Simba when he quit on his ambitions. What we see is stagnation and decay. Stagnation in his life and decay back at home. Simba got bigger, but he didn't grow up. He was stuck in runaway mode, and his character hadn't changed since the moment Scar told him to run away and never return. And then Nala tells him about the backward slide that life has taken back at home. Food supplies dwindling, prosperity plummeting. And that's what happens when we live a life without some sort of drive and desire for improvement. We either stay the same or fall into decline. But we all know what got our boy out of this mess. Between Nala, Rafiki, Timon and Pumbaa, and the big cat in the sky, Simba gets his ambition and purpose back. And that leads us to the biggest difference between good intentions and bad intentions. Good ambition isn't selfish. When Simba went back to Pride Rock, he didn't do it just for himself. He didn't fight for the throne's sake. He did it for his family. He did it for Nala. He did it for the good of the Pride Lands. He did it to return his home back to its former glory. When we have goals, we should do it for ourselves, but we should not be the only benefactors. Does our end game make others better? Does it serve others in some way? If you can answer those questions, you know you're on the right track. Because here's the thing, if Simba didn't have his ambition infused with goodwill for others, he would have ended up just like Scar. Because as a kid, Simba's ambition was driven by what he could get out of the experience. And if he had continued on that path and became king, chances are he would have turned out to be some version of the Mad Monarch himself. Let's go to the flip side, and I'll show you. When we see Scar pursue his ambition for the title of King of Pride Rock, we see how his drive was tainted and ultimately dangerous. The first sign we see is that he uses those around him. In his first interaction with his nephew, we see the conversation ends with him convincing Simba to go to the elephant graveyard. He didn't do it to be the cool uncle like Sim Sim thinks. Scar had a plan to get Simba there so that the hyenas could pick him off. He uses his nephew's naivete and the hyena's desperation for food to get what he wanted. And this continues in Scar's theme song. Even as he convinces the hyenas that he's on their side and he's there for them, we later find out that his promises were that of a slimy politician. Because as soon as Simba comes back and he's ready to take back what is rightfully his, what does he do? He sells out his crew, saying that it's their fault for the kingdom's decline. Uncle Scar is just out for himself. And if your ambition involves manipulating people and using them only as far as they're useful to you, that's a problem. And this is because the lion dictator's goals were self-driven. As long as he got his, it didn't matter who got in his way. It didn't matter who suffered. As long as he got his power in his title, who cares if the Pride Land loses its green? Who cares if his own subjects die? After all, they only exist to serve him, right? Obviously, we can't treat people like that. Selfishness, manipulating others, using people and then discarding them once they've completed your purpose. We see this all over the place in our world, and at times it even works. But then there's the thing. Those actions, that mindset, ultimately leads to one place: destruction. And that is the end result of dark ambitions. It's destructive. With Scar, it destroyed his relationship with his brother. Shoot, it straight up murdered him. It almost destroyed Simba's life. It destroyed his home, destroyed his mind with paranoia and insecurity. This guy got triggered whenever someone brought up his dead brother's name. He was messed up, and this all led to his self-destruction. He had lived his whole life for himself and sold out the only group that had his back, and in the end, it left him to burn. You'll notice that even when Scar had everything he wanted, he was the king, he had the power, he wasn't happy. This cat was miserable. There was no joy in his ill-gotten gains. That is perhaps the biggest trap of wrong-headed ambition. Even if you win, you still lose. You don't get to enjoy the fruit of your labor because the fruit is rotten. Don't be fooled by those who lied, betrayed, and tricked their way to the top, because in the end, all they got is fear, greed, and an emptiness that gnaws at them. Compare that to the end of the movie with Simba. He's got his family, his friends, and the support of those who helped him along the way. That's the final destination of ambition that we want. One that fulfills not just our lives, but the lives of those around us. One that helps not just ourselves, but possibly even strangers. Do your goals and dreams have that kind of ending? Because if they do, that's an ambition to have pride in.
You're watching the fascinating world of edutainment and life-improving video channel.
Kids! I can't find the remote and I refuse to stand up!
Stay tuned for your Saturday morning dose of guidance from the guidance guy.
Kids!
People, I gotta make an apology to you all right now. I waited way too long to get into Gravity Falls. Even before I had people asking me to cover the show, I've been wanting to get into it. The characters, the lore, the respect for continuity. The real mystery of Gravity Falls was not about the journals or the odd happenings of the town, but rather how the show only got 2 seasons. Oh well, the perils of show business. But even with all the intrigue that Gravity Falls gives us, there's so much more to this little town in Oregon than we even thought. I wasn't kidding. Gravity Falls is more than just an animated sci-fi horror comedy hybrid about conspiracies, ghosts, and other weirdness. At its core, Gravity Falls is about relationships. And no, we're not just talking about Mabel and her many escapades. But seriously though, Team Armando for life. Whether it's between our mystery twins, Pacifica and her parents, or Stan and his brother, the bonds between characters are at the heart and soul of this cult classic. But beyond simply going into these connections themselves, we're going to look into how these citizens relate to each other with some good old psychology. What can Gravity Falls show us about relationships? I'm the guidance guy, and your internet school counselor is about to open a portal to another level of human interaction. Let's go, shall we? Our journey begins with a psychologist named John Bowlby who developed what's now called the theory of attachment, which describes how people perceive, attain, and maintain relationships. He developed this theory in the 1930s while he was trying to discover what caused some of the children that he worked with to get in trouble with authority. He developed this theory by observing how babies interacted with their parents. And to give the TLDR version of his work, when infants had a strong bond with their parents or caregivers, when they were properly fed, changed, and so on, they tended to be able to form positive bonds with other people as they got older, while those who didn't tended to have a harder time with that. But for our purposes, we'll be focusing on a later development on his theory made by one of Bowlby's associates, Mary Ainsworth. She expanded on Bowlby's work by describing specific forms of attachment. These forms are secure, anxious, avoidant, and dismissive avoidant. And this is where our colorful characters come in. Some of our favorite denizens of this sleepy town fall perfectly into these quadrants, and we're going to be starting with the anxious attachment. So what does anxious attachment look like? Let me read off the signs. Of course, you're going to see anxiety, but that can also escalate into paranoia over the state of a relationship. And this fear can make someone jealous, possessive, manipulative, and desperate for attention and validation. And who exactly does that sound like in this crazy little town? Well, you might actually be thinking of two people, Mabel and good old Gideon. People with anxious attachment can be described as clingy when they're in the pursuit of or when they're in relationships. And there's tons of evidence to show that Mabel fits this description in this regard, and she has even showed signs of being possessive and controlling like she was when she was housing, not One Direction. But where Mabel shows this kind of attachment exclusively with guys that she's crushing on, with Gideon it's with everybody. With Mabel, the people of Gravity Falls, this neurotic need to be seen is in everything that he does. When he fell for Mabel, he fell hard. He quickly escalated from several love levels to "you belong to me" territory. Anxious attachment can show by either craving the approval of the object of their affection or by lashing out when they feel the relationship is being threatened. And Gideon does both. In his first appearance, we see him going all out to impress Mabel. Fancy dinners, expensive outings, he spared no expense in wooing everyone's favorite sweater collector. But when Mabel, or anyone else for that matter, tried to tell him that she just wasn't into him like that, he flipped. He was taking out his journal, calling on all kinds of magic to keep Mabel in his grasp. This type of attachment in people is born from a deep-seated insecurity about themselves and those around them. They may feel like they need to earn the love of others around them or that a relationship will complete them in some way. And in the little man's case, he's trying to soothe over his feelings of loneliness. You'll notice that Gideon isn't seen alone very often. He's either surrounded by the fans of the town, his dad, and later on, his inmate crew. Gideon's constant need for approval stems from his need to not be left alone. And in attachment theory, a great deal of one's attachment style originates from how they were connected to their parents. For someone with anxious attachment, their childhood was marked by the parents either misreading their child's needs or fulfilling those needs in a way that's self-serving to the parent. And though we don't know how Gideon was raised as a baby, we do get glimpses into his family life. Though he has a relationship with his father, it's very transactional. It's more of a business partnership than a father-son connection. Gideon's little grift makes money for the family on top of Bud's used car shop. Bud uses his son to fulfill his own financial goals as opposed to being a solid source of unconditional love and selfless support. And as for Gideon and his mom, she might as well not exist. There's only one time where Gideon speaks to his mother on screen. And what does he say? Mother. Yeah, that's it. Now that relationship could be the result of anything from neglect to Gideon icing out his mom for unknown reasons along the way. Either way, Gideon has been accustomed to either receiving attention for someone else's gain or not getting attention at all. This puts pretty much everything about Gideon into perspective. It doesn't excuse his behavior, of course, but it helps us gain understanding into his psyche. And if you want more insight into what these self-centered types could do, then check out my Let's Guide guy on Loki. I put the description below and in that special corner up top. Next up, let's look at the avoidant type of attachment. Now, of the four styles, this one is actually the least researched as it's also the most rare. This type of attachment is defined by a simultaneous desire and fear of relationships. They want to be with someone, but they don't, all at the same time. That's naturally going to lead to conflicting and confusing ideas about how a relationship will pan out and one's own desire for a relationship in the first place. And although there's no one in the show that fits into this attachment style for all relationships, this is what we see in Dipper in his feelings for Wendy. Especially in season 1, Dipper is all over the place. One moment he wants to be with the chill store clerk, up until the moment he actually has to do something to show his interest. He has that box of Wendy pics that we never really found out how he got in the first place, but he's also fully aware of the fact that a relationship between himself and a high schooler is just a fantasy. Thankfully, he's able to come to an understanding of his own feelings and still have a healthy friendship with Wendy, so he doesn't stay in that category for long. Not to mention some of the other aspects of the avoidant type of attachment we don't really see with Dipper, so I put a few links in the description if you want to know more about this specific type and what it would look like with real life people. And for anyone wondering, it is possible for someone to transition from one style to another based on life experiences. If you feel you find yourself in one of these less than ideal types of attachment, you're not destined to be stuck in it. Just like how we saw people and relationships change over the course of Gravity Falls, we can also change ourselves. In regards to how we relate to others, in order to address that, I would recommend getting professional help for this issue, but always know that change is possible. Speaking of change, we're going to transition to our next style of attachment, the dismissive avoidant style. In this style, think of it as the opposite of the anxious style. Instead of desperately seeking attention and validation, those with the dismissive avoidant type go out of their way to steer clear of meaningful relationships altogether. They pride themselves on being independent, not needing anybody or anything, but can also be emotionally stunted and unwilling to acknowledge the feelings of themselves or others. Now, based on that alone, for those of us who know Gravity Falls, we know who that describes. None other than Grunkle Stan himself. Stan prides himself in his ability to rely on his own skills and abilities, and has lived most of his adult life untethered to relationships and other people. In fact, at times he goes out of his way to distance himself from those who would otherwise want to establish connections with the scheming curmudgeon. It is not hard to see where old Stanley got this attitude from. Growing up with a father who was impossible to please and a mother that seemed more interested in securing the bag than anything else, Stan's relationship with his twin brother was a great source of validation and affirmation in his life. But we all know what happened. Take a mistakenly broken infinite motion machine and a brother's lost dream, and Stan is left not just devastated, but abandoned by his family. With no one left to look after except himself, Stan stopped caring about being needed or wanted and looked out just for himself. And like we saw with Dipper, the man once known as 8-Ball Alcatraz also changed over the course of the show. Sure, it was pretty much at the last minute and he almost lost his mind in the process, but hey, better late than never. And last but not least, we've got the secure attachment style. And guessing by the name, you can tell that this is the one you want to have. In the secure attachment type, we see people who have a strong sense of their own self-worth, which in turn gives them a proper and healthy view of their relationships free from jealousy or drama. The relationships do not define them, they have a strong connection to their emotions, and they're able to bounce back from setbacks. Now, seeing how we just finished talking about Stan the man, we can put him and Ford as kids and at the end of the series as an example of a secure attachment type. And naturally, Mabel and Dipper belong in this category as well in relation to each other. Come on, it was the strength of their relationship that led to them saving the world. But we can't forget about the two characters who are most excellent examples of this type from day one. I'm talking about Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Derlin. These two show the way, the support, the openness, the understanding that they have. It's straight up inspiring, man, to see so many good examples of relationships in just one show. Because let me tell you something. Here's the thing about a lot of media out there today. A lot of them thrive on the dysfunction in relationships. If you were to use this tool on some other shows and see how many relationships are actually secure, you'd be hard-pressed to find any in some of them. And yeah, I get it, drama is what brings the viewers, but what I want to leave you with is two things. 1. Relationships build on one another. Just like a house, our relationships build on top of each other and show us how to relate to others in future relationships. Like we saw with Stan or Gideon, how people are treated in the past can have a massive impact on how they treat others in the present. And understanding that people act the way they do for a reason and not because they're evil for the sake of being evil, can go a long way in gaining empathy with certain people. But that leads to my second point. Don't let the past define your future. Learn from yesterday. See where you can improve from it, but don't assume that your future and your past are going to be the same. Those who do tend to have those unhealthy attachment styles. But it's those who know who they are, connect themselves with those who love them and respect them, and are willing to face both the highs and lows of life, end up being not just the most resilient, but the most secure. And not only are they secure, but they end up living the adventure of a lifetime.
Superheroes are part of your brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You want superheroes to protect you and make yourself ever more powerless in the process. while you tell yourself you're being looked after.
Alright. I see what you're doing, screenslaver. Using your monologue as a commentary on the common man and how much they don't have an appreciation for the real world and have lost the ability to be proactive in their own lives. I got you, and frankly, you make some good points. But here's the thing, Evelyn. Yeah, I know who you are. You may be using your mind puppet to rage against the normies, but let's be real here. Your anger isn't really aimed towards them, is it? Nah, your villainous venom is really meant for your brother. Sounds like someone needs to talk to the guidance guy. The Incredibles 2 was really supposed to be better than it was. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't terrible, it's still a decent film at the end of the day, but the more time I spend away from this story, the more the voices of the people saying that it was just a retread of the first one just got louder. I mean, with the time that it took to make this thing, I had already written a movie in my head that advanced the characters more than the actual sequel did. But that's not why we're here. We're here to understand the, maybe genius, but billionaire, probably not playboy, but definitely philanthropist, Winston Endevour. This eager superfan is all about bringing the metahumans out of the shadows just like in the old days. But if you take away the money and the tech and all the CEO perks, what you have left is someone who is a lot more like us than you think. How was one of the least interesting characters in The Incredibles 2 even worth talking about? I'm the guidance guy, and your internet school counselor just might surprise you. When we first meet Winston, he's gathered up our trio of Elastigirl, Frozone, and Mr. Incredible to recruit them for his plan to bring heroes back from their government-sanctioned exile. As he goes through his sales pitch, you can feel his energy, his love for the superhero, and their ability to inspire others. And if we're really honest, we can see ourselves in this 1%er fanboy. Superheroes have dominated our media landscape for over a decade now. They've been making bank at the box office, making heroes that some of us have never heard about our new favorites, and they've been transforming our cultural landscape in a way that we've never seen before. But why now, though? What is it about these times that have created this age of heroes? One major factor is the economic uncertainty of our time. The first Iron Man movie, the film that kickstarted the whole shebang of the MCU, came out in 2008. Want to know what else happened in 2008? The Great Recession. Jobs were being cut and incomes were being interrupted. And historically, superheroes sell more when the economy is down. For example, superhero comics were killing it during the Great Depression, but not so much during the 80s and 90s. Another factor that has led to the superhero renaissance is, well, nothing much, just the general trash state of the world. I'm not kidding, I mentioned it in my Persona 5 video, but we all know that our world ain't right. Corruption on every level in seemingly every area of life, widespread greed that's making the rich richer and the poor poorer. We can't ignore the mess that our world is in right now. But what we can do is escape from it every once in a while. And watching stories of people overcoming great odds, defeating personal demons, and taking on world-ending battles does something to us. It can either cause us to desire to be the hero and help others, or give us a comfort in wanting to be delivered from our day-to-day. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no wrong way to enjoy these flicks. If you can enjoy them in a healthy way, then have at it. The danger always comes from the extremes though. And when we tend to lean in too close to wanting to be saved, that's when we run into Mr. Endeavour's main issue. The D-Man's love for the supers was completely understandable and natural, but the point where he and his villainous sister disagree is how the existence of supers influenced their day-to-day decisions. The event that changed both Endeavour siblings was the night that they were victims of a home invasion. They and their mother were taken into the safe room while their father did the thing that seemed the most natural to him. He went to his specialty phones to call his favorite heroes. He did that not remembering that the supers had been forced into hiding and that no one was on the other line. And sadly, Father Endeavour lost his life as a result of that miscalculation. Now, even though that's not gonna happen to us, what we do see is what psychologists call an external locus of control. Locus of control is a concept that describes the extent to which a person believes that they have control over the events of their lives. Those with an internal locus of control believe that they are the captains of their life, that their actions have an impact on their reality, and thus they can change their reality based on what they do. Those with an external locus of control are more likely to believe that outside forces like luck or fate have a bigger influence over the direction of their lives than they do. If Winston and Evelyn's father had an internal locus of control, he wouldn't have relied on the caped ones to come to his family's rescue. He would have either joined the rest of the family in the safe room or come up with his own way to keep his wife and children safe. But instead, he put his faith in the external factor of his favorite supers to do the job. And that's the danger that we can fall into. A mindset that needs someone else to help us, some situation to bail us out, some twist of fate that will allow them to live the life that they want. That's what Screenslaver was ranting and raving about. Evelyn saw her family become victims of an external locus of control and saw it ultimately destroy her father and mother. And even though the method that she used to get her message out wasn't the best, she was onto something. So how can we avoid Winston's fate? Well, you know, the I'm helpless and need people to save me part, not the super rich and successful part. I'll take that last part all day, every day. But if you feel you need to improve your locus of control, there are two quick ways to get started. 1. Look at what you can change. Think of a challenge you have in your life. What are the actions you can take that could directly change the outcome of that challenge? What can you do to turn the tables? Think about them, then write them down, and then do it. You gotta execute on your plan. Don't make excuses either. Pull a Nike and just do it. And lastly, own the results. Good or bad, hit the mark or sorely miss it, you gotta take responsibility. Don't pass blame or make excuses, because when you do that, you're giving up your power. And we all have power. Power to change our situations, power to change our circumstances, power to change ourselves. And all we need to do to access that power is to see what we want for ourselves. Make a plan and then follow through. It's okay to be fans of heroes. Just don't forget that your biggest hero should be you. Whether you love it or hate it, revel in it or avoid it at all costs, drama is going to be a part of your life at some point or another. Because the truth is, as long as you interact with other people, the potential for drama and conflict will always exist. As long as there's tea on the table, there's a chance that it's gonna spill. And when that hot beverage spills, oh boy, watch out. Cause in my time as a guidance counselor, easily the biggest concern I work with students through is drama. Yeah, it's not bullying, it's not any other buzzword we throw around, it's drama. And as it turns out, there's a movie that goes into what causes drama amongst people, the very force that can destroy friendships. And oddly enough, it's Wreck-It Ralph 2 that reveals this secret. Hey, don't give me that look, I'm serious. How on earth does Ralph Breaks the Internet expose the source of all drama? I'm the guidance guy, and let's take a look into this. Now before we get started, I want to let you know about a couple videos I got out. I dropped a surprise video a few days ago about everyone's favorite aardvark, Arthur Reed, and then last week I did a mini on the most powerful android in the MCU. If you got time, go ahead and check them out. I put them up there in that corner. Pretty good stuff. And if you want to help out your internet school counselor, do the YouTube thing. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, cause why are you holding out on me like that, man? And be sure to have those notifications on. But let's keep moving. Wreck-It Ralph 2 on the surface is about how Ralph and Penelope were able to save Sugar Rush from being condemned after the game broke. And it can be hard to see this movie as little more than a lighthearted romp of a sequel. To me, it always felt like this movie happened because some Disney execs saw the Emoji Movie and said to each other, bruh, we could do better than that, and then went and did that thing. But despite the cotton candy feels and the massive amounts of Disney fan service, there's a surprising amount of depth in this movie, and it comes from the friendship between Ralph and the most subversive Disney princess of all time. These two have been friends for 6 years at this point, and Ralph is more than content to keep things the way they've been. They work in their respective games during the day, and then hang out after they clock out. But the Peppermint Princess wants a little more to her current existence, and as the film goes on, she finds that answer. Slaughter Race. The excitement, the unpredictability, the gritty realism. She wanted all of that in life. But here's Ralph over here, trying to keep her away from that life, from that dream of hers. And Ralph's desire to keep things the way they've always been eventually leads him to trying to sabotage Slaughter Race with a virus that exploits weaknesses. Naturally, this doesn't go as planned, and it ends up creating a Gigantamax Ralph that threatens to take Penelope for himself and destroy everything in the internet. and it's only with the combined powers of the Disney princesses and Ralph resolving his issues that they're able to save the day and do the thing that they were in the internet to do in the first place. But Ralph's journey does in fact show us the source of all drama: insecurity. At the end of the day, the reason for all the conflict that occurs in Ralph Breaks the Internet is a direct result of Ralph's insecurity. He wanted to keep life the way he'd been used to. He didn't want to lose Vanellope, not to another game, not to Shank, not nobody. As they both explored the internet and the vast options that existed in that realm, Ralph wondered if he was enough for her, if he could still matter to her in this world of endless possibility. Compared to the stable life that they had lived before, the net was the complete opposite. It was everything Vanellope was asking for, and it terrified the Wrecker. He was insecure because he felt inadequate. That suddenly with Von Schweetz with new friends and new experiences, that Ralph now felt irrelevant, and he dedicated himself to proving to his friend just how vital he still was, not realizing that by doing so, he was turning himself into the very thing he wanted to outgrow in the first movie: a villain, culminating in a massive, creep-tastic monster that was so focused on his obsession of keeping and possessing his friend that literally nothing else mattered. And this is something that I see a lot with my students. One person may be jealous that their close friend is expanding their pool of acquaintances, or they may try to control their friend group by setting up rules as to who they can and can't talk to. And all of that is rooted in a form of insecurity. The truth is, we all have some measure of weakness, some sort of inadequacy that can overcome us and turn us into someone we're not if we're not careful. For some, it may be a fear of being abandoned by those closest to us, or fear of not doing and being perfect in everything, or of being alone. And those weaknesses can cause us to act in ways that on the surface look like we're protecting ourselves and giving us the life that we want, but in reality are simply creating a house of cards that can collapse with a strong gust of wind. And there are really only two surefire ways to protect yourself from drama. One, don't surround yourself with people who have nothing but drama following them. Cause don't think that it won't get to you, because it will, and it gets ugly when it happens. I've seen it too many times. You don't have to be directly involved in the drama to be dragged into it. The second way is to not let your insecurities control you. Understand what your triggers are, what your fears are. Spend some time finding out where those fears came from and confront the lies that keep those insecurities alive. If you need to reach out for help to fight that battle, do it. Why not get help if it's gonna make you better? Because when it comes to our own fears and insecurities, we can choose to wreck it or allow it to wreck ourselves and our relationships. Rise up, GG Nation, cause it's time for Guidance Guy Friday, your weekly guidance lesson from your internet school counselor. And how's it going? We're about to notch 2 weeks of school done, and things are slowly starting to heat up. You've met all your teachers, you might have had some homework by now, and you may have even heard the T word get dropped already. Which one? You know the one. Test. Hey now, chill. It's okay. It's not like you have a test coming up right now. At least, I hope not, because if you do, then...
hold on to your butts.
We're gonna keep it pushing our look at resiliency, which is what? The ability to bounce back from hard times. Last time we looked at Deku from My Hero Academia to see how his resiliency helped him become a hero. And today we're gonna go into the wonderful world of Disney to see how Mulan used her resilience to create her legendary story. Oh, and don't forget to slice that subscribe button and like this video, cause it brings honor to the channel. Let's go! It's guidance time! Just in case anybody forgot, let's go over the 3 ways to be resilient. Cause there's no way you'd forget that, right? Don't blame me, GG Nation. The summer slide is real. Some of you forgot how to write over the last 2 months, so I'm gonna ease you back into this. You can show resilience by blocking out the negative, being creative, and never giving up. Now, as we go over Mulan's story, think about how she showed these 3 traits in her situation. And for anybody wondering, we'll be going over the OG Disney version of Mulan, not the boring remake that nobody saw because of the, you know,
Coronavirus!
And also, spoilers for Mulan, I guess. Listen, this movie came out in the 90s. If you haven't seen this thing by now, that's on you, bro.
What's wrong with you?
At the start of the movie, China is at war. The Huns are invading the country on a quest to take it over. And to help boost the army, the Emperor of China makes a law saying that one man from every family in the empire has to fight in the army to take down the enemy. Mulan's father wants to fight in the war, but he's a little bit on the older side and is already injured from previous battles. Mulan begs her father to stand down, but he has every intent to fight no matter how hurt he is. This is where our heroine takes matters into her own hands. She swipes her own man's armor and sword, cuts her hair, and enters the Imperial Army as a man. Now throw in a lucky cricket and a talking lizard.
Dragon, not lizard. I don't do that tongue thing.
Whatever. Add your animal sidekicks and you got yourself a Disney classic. And despite the law saying that women can't serve in the military, the many people who thought that she couldn't cut it as a soldier, and oh yeah, the fact that she can't even fight! Fa Mulan plays a major part in the war, and at times does a full-on carry job in order to take down the Huns. So now that we're reminding ourselves of the story, let's go deeper to see what Mulan's brand of resiliency looks like, specifically with her creativity.
We've got a long way to go.
Okay, so have you heard the old saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result? That phrase describes what resilience looks like when you don't give up and block out the negative, but aren't creative in solving your problem. You can block out the haters and never give up all you want, but if you keep using the same failed strats over and over again, you're only going to end up with... Let's look at Mulan's situation. Her original problem was that her father was going to join the army when it wasn't the best thing for him. The first thing she tried to do was try to talk him out of it. And how did that go?
Father, you can't go.
Mulan.
Please, sir. My father has already fought bravely.
Silence! Mulan, you dishonor me.
Not so great. But she blocks out the negative and the straight up rejection and tries again later that night.
You shouldn't have to go. There are plenty of young men to fight for China.
It is an honor to protect my country and my family.
So you'll die for honor.
I will die doing what's right. I know my place. It is time you learned yours.
So she's 0 for 2 on talking daddy out of the war thing. At this point, she needs a new approach. She needs to get creative. So she goes, bump this, I'm gonna do it myself, and joins the army while incognito mode. Then she runs into problem 2. Cool, my dad's not in the army, but how do I fight? Captain Shang is in full boot camp mode to get his civilian army into fighting shape, and Mulan has to master the art of war while still being able to pass as a bro. Except the only bro anybody's given her is...
Bruh.
Oh no.
Bruh.
Panic! Boom!
Bruh.
It's not looking good. In fact, it's so bad that the Cap straight up tells her to get out. And here again, she ignores the negative voices of her haters and keeps trying, which not only proves to Shang that she can be a warrior, but also inspires her squad to level up. But it's when Mulan enters battle for the first time when her creativity literally saves her life. Mulan and company are ambushed by the Huns in the mountains. They're outnumbered and overpowered. They need a major move to escape death. Captain Shang has a plan, but he's playing it by the book, doing what anyone else would have done in that situation. But Mulan goes full Miles Morales and goes,
I'm gonna do my own thing.
And takes a cannon, and instead of aiming it at the army, she aims it at the mountaintop, creating an avalanche that takes out the Huns and gives the army the W. But then Mulan comes up against problem number 3. What do I do if I get exposed? And that's exactly what happens after that battle. And after saving their lives, by the way, her cover is blown and she's left to die in the snow. And despite the hate that was thrown her way, and after she saved their lives too. Man, that's just disrespectful and petty. She blocks it out after seeing the Huns rise from the snow and head towards the capital. And with that intel, she can't just give up now, so she goes to the Emperor's city to warn the army. But Shang isn't listening to her. So what does she do? She gets creative, son! She recruits her military friends to get themselves into the palace in disguise, which allows her to save the Emperor from Shan Yu's attack and finish him off once and for all. Now that may be the end of Mulan's story, but how does her life impact yours?
It looks like you're out of ideas.
Not quite.
Mulan's creativity gave her the ability to keep her father out of the army, save said army from the Huns, and ultimately save all of China. So how can creativity work in your situation? It depends on the problem, because there are many ways to solve the issue. But that's exactly the first step to unlocking creative resilience. Remember that there's more than one way. Life isn't math where there's only one answer to the problem. Most times, a situation will have many ways to get around it. It could look like looking at the problem from another perspective, or going through it step by step to see where issues come up. Secondly, remember that creativity is a team effort. Mulan didn't save the emperor by herself. She got her friends to help her in that mission, and you have that same option too. Ask for help. Check to see how someone else might get through your problem, because 2 heads are better than 1. The story of Mulan is one of courage, determination, and unstoppable resilience. Her creativity showed her different ways to solve a problem, and that relying on others made her stronger than she ever could have been alone. And remember, you have that same kind of creativity as well.
The power is yours!
Welcome back to the Character Corner, where we're continuing our look into what mentorship is. Now that you know what a mentor is, let's take a look at what a mentor looks like. Because just like how not every friend is a good one, not all mentors are the right one for you. A good mentor is someone who's great at what they do. They enjoy what they do, and you just know they got that juice that others don't. 2, make sure that they have time to mentor you. People are busy, and even though someone might be a great teacher for you, if they don't have the time, it's not gonna work out. And 3, you gotta like each other, cause trust, if you have a mentor who you don't like or they're not really feeling you, then you're both wasting your time. So let's put it all together. A great mentor is someone who is great at their craft, they have the time to teach you, and the both of you get along. Having a mentor is like any other relationship. Certain things gotta match up before you can level up. Rise up, GG Nation, cause it's time for Guidance Guy Friday, your weekly guidance lesson from your internet school counselor. And can I be real with you right now? Sometimes it feels good to be bad. And if there's any group that embodies the idea of, come on, be evil, it's fun, it's Disney villains with diabolical rogues like Scar, Ursula, and Cruella de Vil. They have the ability to make you fear them, hate them, but at the same time, you secretly like them. But I got a bone to pick with one of these legends, someone who shows up in all the marketing for this wretched hive of scum and villainy, the mistress of all evil herself, Maleficent. And I gotta say, nah, she ain't it, fam. Miss Mal is nothing more than an overrated petty excuse for a bad guy. Yeah, I said it, and I'ma prove it too. You ready for your 4 reasons Maleficent stands? Cause it's guidance time. Listen, I never got the hype for Miss Dragon Fairy here. Yeah, the House of Mouse has given her GOAT status as a baddie. Sure, her Animorph transform into a dragon thing is legit cool. And if you don't know what an Animorph is, ask your millennial teacher or go to the media center and educate yourself.
Educate yourself!
And even outside of Disney and games like Kingdom Hearts, she's set up as the gold standard of skullduggery. But why though? Let's check out her resume to see if her actions really warrant the rep. And spoilers for Sleeping Beauty, I guess. Listen, even if you didn't see this film, you know what happens. It's not even an A-tier Disney movie. Sorry, SP fans, but if the main character of her own story is taking a nap for a third of it, then I'ma stick to my Lion King, thank you very much. Let's start with the Horned One's first appearance in Sleeping Beauty, at the event that kicks off the whole movie. Homegirl shows up at a party celebrating the new princess, clearly isn't wanted by anyone in attendance, goes on about how much she mustn't have gotten her invite, only to be told to her face that she wasn't invited at all. Sure, she's all sarcastic about it, but come on now, you can't call yourself the mistress of all evil and then get all passive-aggressively sassy when people don't want you around them. BT dubs, some of you should be taking notes. Don't act like you're the baddest on the streets and then get all sad when you ain't got no friends. And there's reason 1, she doesn't have the greatest self-awareness. She can't own up to the fact that there are consequences for being the bad guy. But then she exposes herself even further by what she does next, so she's all butthurt about being ghosted to this shindig. Her response? She curses Princess Aurora, not to die a horrible death. She doesn't just end her right there and then, but she gives her the most convoluted death of all time. Death by spinning wheel? On her 16th birthday? And this is your mistress of malevolence? Your duchess of destruction? Miss me with that. If she was truly evil, she would have ended baby girl right there and then, and if she wanted to prolong the suffering, she'd put a curse on the king and queen to make sure they kick the bucket in a couple weeks so she could take the throne and become the true empress of evil. Now, I don't know what this says about me coming up with this dastardly scheme, but it is what it is. And with that, we got reasons 2 and 3. Maleficent is not only petty for getting her fifis hurt, she really doesn't think things through. She didn't think that the Powerpuff Fairies would try to mess up her plan, or that giving Aurora's parents 16 years to thwart her operation is about, 16 years too many? Let's be real, GG Nation. Maleficent's reputation as an S-tier baddie is mostly based on vibes. Sure, she's got the look, the chilling voice, and the fact that her pet bird is named after the literal devil? She's coasting harder than a gifted kid on a standardized test. But beneath all the magic and the dragon form, all I see is a petty, vengeful, and kinda impulsive chick who's mean pretty much for the fun of it. And I haven't even gotten to reason 4 yet. It's time we face the truth about Miss Mal. She ain't no villain. She's just a bully.
You poor simple fools, thinking you could defeat me, the mistress of all evil.
Alright, I had my fun. Time for me to stop downing the haterade and put on my counselor hat. And while I do, go ahead and put a spell on that subscribe button and put that like button to sleep. But for me, when I see someone who is willing to cause pain to others, the first question I have for them is, who hurt you? There's a saying that's become popular these days that goes, hurt people hurt people. In other words, the only kind of person who would willingly cause distress to others is someone who is already distressed and in pain. And it's here where we need to take another look at Maleficent. Now, the OG story of Sleeping Beauty doesn't give Mal any sort of backstory. She just shows up, says,
I'm the bad guy. Duh.
And then spends the rest of the movie being said bad guy. But if we look at the 2014 Sleeping Beauty remake named after the so-called Mistress of All Evil, we start to get some answers as to how she turned out the way she did. And the truth is, Maleficent wasn't born evil. She was a strong, kind and compassionate fairy, with giant bald eagle wings to boot. But
Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
the fairies and other magical creatures were at war with the humans, and the king declares that anyone who ends Maleficent can marry his daughter, effectively becoming prince. A young man named Stefan takes on the challenge, finds Maleficent, puts on the Riz, and then puts her to sleep with a magic potion, and then cuts her wings off because he couldn't bring himself to fully commit to the assassin bit. Now, here's the truth bomb. Stefan and Mal were best friends growing up. And Stefan, he eventually grows up to become king and Aurora's father. So we have someone who's on one hand a petty bully, but also someone who was betrayed by a close friend and stripped of her ability to fly, all because of that same friend's thirst for power. Kinda changes the equation, doesn't it? Mal is no longer just evil for evil's sake, but a deeply hurt and traumatized person lashing out at the very people who ruined her life. And that's reason 4. Mal isn't really evil as much as she just has emotional damage.
Emotional damage!
Now, I will say this. Her trauma does not excuse her actions. Aurora had nothing to do with Maleficent's beef with King Stefan, and if anything, she may have used Aurora as an excuse to mess with her ex-BFF. She didn't have to become evil, but we now see why she chose that path. And actually, this all comes back around to bullying when you think about it.
Our sword of truth flies swift and sure, that evil die and good endure.
When you take away the cool powers and the dark aura that Maleficent carries around, all you have left is a broken person who's taking her own pain out on everybody else. And in my work, no matter what school I'm at, I see the same thing. Bullies who make other people's lives miserable are themselves miserable and are just trying to spread it around. And I want that to be our first takeaway. Bullies are broken people. They aren't evil supervillains bent on world domination. They're just hurt people who hurt people. Again, this doesn't make their actions okay in the slightest. I say this to make my second point. Bullies are nothing without fear. Maleficent seems so unstoppable, so invincible because the people around her feared her. And that's everyone. Even the king, the queen, and the good fairies shuddered at her name. But then came Prince Philip, Aurora's hero and savior of the kingdom. He took Maleficent on without the fear that everyone else had for her. And look what happened. One shot. Remember, bullies only have as much power as you give them. But the second you stand up to them by either talking to a teacher, dean, or counselor, or just confronting the bully themselves, they quickly turn into the paper tiger they always were. Maleficent is an excellent example of a bully, ruling by fear and impulse. But the second someone says enough and takes them on fearlessly, victory is just around the corner.
Sesame Street was brought to you today by the
Welcome back to the Character Corner, where our talk on decision making continues. And when it comes to bullying, we all have a choice to make. If you're the bully, are you going to continue the cycle of humiliation and pain? For the victim, will you continue to let that cycle of pain and humiliation keep you in fear? And for everyone else who sees bullying happening around them, are you going to continue to pretend that it isn't happening? Us in schools often make the mistake of thinking that the way to stop bullying is just to stop the bullying. Yeah, it helps, but harassment doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are always witnesses, people who can do something, say something. Even in the case of Sleeping Beauty, Aurora's parents didn't sit on their hands and do nothing. They made a choice and created a plan to stop Maleficent. A really stupid plan, but the point is, they did something. And I don't say this to shame anybody. I say this to empower those involved with bullying that the power does not lie with the bully, but with you. No, you can't make them change, but you can help make it harder for them to torment others. You can be the person that leads to consequences and safety for the victims. We make thousands of choices every single day. Let's make sure we make decisions that give power to those who need it, and take power away from those who abuse it. But before you go, did you know that Simba and Scar from The Lion King are pretty much the same character? Go click on this link to find out how.